Hi everyone, Father Alex here. I am the vicar of St Matthew's Church in Burnley, which is in Lancashire in the UK. And probably for people watching abroad, the nearest big city is Manchester. I'm also the host of the Godcast, and I'm the author of Our Daily Bread from Argos to the Altar, a Priest Story. You're about to watch an interview with myself and a legendary bass guitarist, Rudy Sarzo. I really hope you enjoy this interview. And if you do, then please hit the subscribe button and check out lots of other recordings with many famous musicians. So enjoy this interview now with Rudy Sarzo. Well, I'm delighted to say that joining me on the Godcast this week is probably the greatest bass player of all time. He told me to say that. It was in the contract. Rudy Sarzo from great bands such as Whitesnake with Ozzy Osbourne and loads more. Rudy, it's a joy to get you on the Godcast. How are you doing?
I'm blessed, and I'm not just saying that because I'm here in your podcast. That's my stock answer, because I am blessed.
Why? Tell us why, Rudy. What makes you feel like you're blessed?
Oh my God! I mean, I was, I mean, if sometimes, I like to review myself where I've been, so I know where, not only where I'm at, but where I'm going. I can make some plans. I can look behind. Having said that, it's sometimes I would say 99% of my plans are not as big as God's plans. When I was young, starving musician, and not so young because I didn't start playing with Ozzy. I was starving until I was 30 years old.
Yeah.
And then that's when I started playing with Ozzy and started making a living, out of music, and so I sacrificed a lot, to do what I love to do, and my vision was very humble. It says, if I can just make enough money so I can have an apartment and a car to drive when I come home from the road, and just be on the road and do, and then maybe find a partner that, a wife that understands what my life is all about, and we can make it work, because I think wives are, they're called rock and roll widows, and they sacrifice so much, and so it's not very easy, because being a musician, especially a rock musician, you're expected to be on the road, especially traditionally back in the days when I started out 40 years ago. You made a record, and then you spend, if it's a hit record, like I played and I tour on for bands with hit records, so I know that it's, if you got a hit record and you're in a band with a hit record, whether you play on the record or not, you're going to be spending months on the road, sometimes year and a half,
Yeah.
And it's a big sacrifice.
Yeah, Rudy, can we go right back to when you were a kid? You grew up, your formative years were in Havana, is that right, in Cuba?
Yes, I was born in Cuba.
What was life like there for you? Just tell us.
Oh, it was very interesting because it wasn't very teen oriented. Life, I mean, if you look at the history of civilization, rock and roll became the first teen music. It was for kids, and they thought, well, the kids are going to grow up and phase out of it. They're going to move on to something else, some serious music, and I think what happened was that in the United States, the government, I mean, and I'm just looking at the facts, they could actually control, they sent Elvis to the army. Okay, we got rid of that one. Okay, next, Chuck Berry. Okay, well, let's get him in some cross state, bringing young ladies across the state so we can put him in jail for that. Okay, great, we got that one. Little Richard, well, he became a minister. And then you got Jerry Lee Lewis, who was married to his cousin. Oh, we got that one. Okay, out of here. You're married to your cousin. So, they rock and roll, by the time that I arrived in the United States in 1961, And I started listening to music pre-rock and roll. In Cuba, we had, Latin music. We just call it music. It's music that everywhere I went, there it was, and it happened to be in Cuba. So I did not know the difference between the genres of music, but it was basically Latin and Latin jazz, because
Yeah.
Dizzy Gillespie was very popular down in Cuba, especially when he changed his sound to incorporate Latin percussion. He had a Cuban conga player in the band. And so I came to the United States, and in '61, and there you are. You have a lot of platters and the Four Seasons, very safe, nothing really raucous like early Beatles, then. And I'm sure that you have this conversation with other musicians of my generation. I mean, I'm 73, so when we all were children, I had just turned 13, and the Beatles came on the Ed Sullivan Show in the United States in 1964. That changed everything. That night, everything was aligned to a point that, boom, there's a shift, not only musically, but social consciousness shift, cultural shift. And it was the perfect storm because it coincided with Kennedy having been murdered, shot, our president. So that happened in November. So we had November, December, January. By February, the youth was ready for something positive to happen in our lives, a light at the end of the tunnel. And the Beatles were it. I'm not sure about the impact the Beatles would have had culturally and socially if it wasn't that we were in such a state of gloom. The youth was, that when we saw that opportunity to it's a bright moment. And for us male musicians to be watching the girls going crazy over the Beatles, Beatlemania went from England. It's like to put it on the plane, and they just landed off the plane, and there it was, Beatlemania.
Rudy,
in New York.
Rudy, Can you remember? Oh, there's two questions, I suppose. Can you remember as a kid growing up the first song that kind of really smacked you between the eyes and thought, "Wow, this is," and then a follow up to that is, one of the books I enjoyed was the autobiography of Johnny Marr. For people in the States who don't know, Johnny Marr was a guitarist with the Smiths. He just fell in love with music. He walked past a music shop, saw a guitar in the window, and said, "Oh, I got to get that. I got to get that. I've got to play." Can you remember, that golden nugget moment where you thought, "I'm going to be a musician"?
My brother and I got a guitar from my folks' Spiegel catalog before the Beatles happened. So Spiegel catalog is kind of like mail order in the United States, Sears and Roebuck, Spiegel, and all that. And I'm talking about the 60s, early 60s, 62, 63. And so we got that guitar, and this is pre-Beatles, a few months before the Beatles. And we started watching country. There were country television in the United States. We had the Jimmy Dean show. He had a show, and then Hoot Nanny, which was more folk. So, guitar oriented, because in school, there was no guitar in the marching bands. And I signed up, and I picked up the trumpet, and it was too loud to have in our apartment in West New York, New Jersey. And then the trombone in Miami. So wasn't practical. And a guitar is such a practical instrument, So it was, I would say that the music, not necessarily a song, but the impact of the music itself, I would say it would have been country, because there were so many great pickers. There were so many great guitar players, from Chet Atkins to Les Paul to all the great Nashville session guitar players that were just so phenomenal. And I'm talking about the early 60s, where the focus was never on the band. It was on the solo artists, like James Burton being an incredible guitar player, and not only with Elvis, but also with Ricky Nelson, who incorporated the Ozzy and Harriet, which where Ricky Nelson came from, and in that show, being one of their kids, and they, at the end of the show, they were incorporating Ricky Nelson playing with his band. So that was another exposure that we got to, like early, very safe rock and roll, like I mentioned, the Four Seasons and Ricky Nelson and all that, the Everly Brothers and so on, which the Beatles drew a lot from.
Yeah, and
So
Rudy,
yeah.
I'm interested to know if you were brought up in a religious family, if your family were religious, and if so, how did that impact what you were allowed to listen to? You know, but you know, I think people of faith have generally become less conservative, but you know, there was some sort of stigma attached to music in the day, wasn't there? You know, just say a bit about that if you would.
Yeah, that's really interesting question, because now, I never thought about it, but I was raised Catholic, and I consider myself a Christian today, not Catholic, but a Christian,
Yeah,
and even though I read the Bible every day, I've been doing that since 1978, and that it's very Catholic based because it's written by so many of the saints, and so uh, you know I think the best reason why my parents never kept me away from any style of music, especially when we moved to the United States, is because they they did not speak English. They did not understand the lyrics.
yeah. So you got
So
to.
I could listen to anything. Yeah, I could listen to anything. They have no idea what I'm listening to.
And that kind of boom of the Beatles, Rudy, did that? I'm
Yeah.
really interested to pursue the kind of the British link. Did that lead you to exploring more British music? Did you feel enthused by it? Quiet Riot. You reproduced two wonderful Slade records. Just interested to know what your take on British music was.
Yeah, it preceded anything that I did with Quiet Riot regarding Slade. I mean, the big shift. I mean, that moment where everything just the big bang, let's say, was when the Beatles opened the door for the British invasion. Because what happened was, like, the Beatles play 4 times on Ed Sullivan in a row, four weekends in a row. And so it was kind of like, okay, who else is out there? Well, let's bring the Stones. Oh, wow, that's really cool. Let's keep bringing them. So it's like, we watch everybody from the Animals to Dave Clark 5, Kinks, you name it.
Mm.
And then there were the American bands that were coming up, because prior to that in America, it was more about the solo artist, the singer, a vocalist, and a backup band. Then now it's like they're looking for bands, because bands is the sound. They want that. They want not just one personality in the group to appeal. No, they want the whole band, different personalities, so they can appeal to different people
Yeah.
and demographics. And which was very interesting, because prior to that, it was a songwriter and a performer market. And what the Beatles did is, when they spent time in their formative musical years playing covers, they were the smart ones. They were the ones who actually learned from playing the covers what makes the covers that they're playing so successful. So they were able to transpose what they learned into their own musical, into their own compositions, their own writing, and now it was expected that bands start getting signed because they could write their own music, which was before that was not the case. It would be a solo artist, and there would be a publishing company attached to the record company that would give them the songs, with the artist relation person was usually part of the publishing company, to record, and that's how the record company made money.
Yeah. And clearly people listening to you speak will just sense, even now, Rudy, a certain vintage. Your passion for music is just there, isn't it? When did that transcend into becoming, I'm going to be a musician? Can you remember that moment? How old you were roughly? Were you kind of late teens or sooner?
And it was for all the wrong reasons. It was when I saw the reaction that the Beatles were getting on TV. The girls, I wanted that. I was a fat little kid, with from another country. I was invisible. I was really invisible. But also in the United States, it was more of a cultural shift in the fact that when I was in Cuba, I didn't think of myself about ethnicities. Even the ethnic groups in Cuba that we had the Jewish people that came during World War II to Cuba. We had Chinese that came during Mao Zedong, when China went communist to Cuba. So we had Italians, we had Irish, and of course, the Caribbean being so dense with European immigration, especially pirates, a lot of pirates, descendants of pirates, in Cuba. And so I really did not think about, we were all Cubans, whether you were Chinese or whether you were Jewish, we were all Cubans, here. And then when I came to the United States and I was actually relocated from Miami to New Jersey, to West New York, then I experienced the separation. Like one block would be Irish, one block would be all the Italians were living there. And that transcended to school. In the school, the same thing. The Irish kids hung out together, the Italians, the Germans, the Jewish kids hang out together. And there was a very small Latin population at the time in West New York, New Jersey, which is it's on the Hudson, across from the city, from Manhattan. And so I was very low key and just kept to myself. And it wasn't until the Beatles that night, the next day in school, all the kids that got into it, that got the message, we started combing our hair down. So now all of a sudden it was like, hey, you're into the Beatles. Yes. Oh, wow. Now we're talking. Now we're visiting each other's homes, meeting their families, getting to know about their culture through the music.
Yeah. Was there ever a time where you nearly wasn't a musician? You said right at the beginning, Rudy, that it was a bit of a long road before success came. Was there points where you just thought, "Well, what's the point?" Or did the love for the music just keep you going?
Yeah, there were times I had to make a decision, and it was a girlfriend that I had. It's usually a girlfriend, right? And and she gives you the ultimatum of like, it's either me or the band. And she was very well,
Move on, Rudy.
Okay. Okay. So I said, okay. And of course, again, doing things for the wrong reason, following other body parts rather than your heart into your journey forward. And so we broke up, and I was all alone in my bedroom, and I looked over to one corner, and there's my 1967 Jazz with spider webs, jazz bass, Fender jazz bass sitting there. And I looked at it and said, you know what? You have never left me. It never did. The bass never walked away. They don't, and it's been a love affair ever since.
And when success did come, was it everything you dreamed of or not?
Oh, beyond. I mean, like I mentioned, I could have a vision of what my life would be if all my dreams came true, and they have all been outdone by all my blessings.
Yeah.
Beyond. I mean, things that I could never imagine. They're part of my life.
Were your parents around to see the success begin?
Oh, yes. My mom passed away earlier this year, and she was living with us till the day she passed away. And my dad experienced it. He passed away 7 years ago. So yes, I mean, yeah. I have a little story. Is when I got my first gold record. Gold records are given to people who are actually not necessarily the ones who played on the record, but contributed to the sales. So, a band can have musicians that did not play on the record because, for whatever reason, like the other musicians are out. Like it happened when I joined Ozzy. we Tommy Aldridge and we came in and we replaced Lee Kerslake and Bob Daisley. But we went out there and we toured, and they were kind enough to actually present me with a gold record for being in the band. And Tommy got one too, and so did the lawyers got him, and the dentist got him, and everybody related got him. So I happened to be on tour, and I had it in my bunk. So we're playing in Miami, and I had my mom and dad come to the show. So I say, you know what? This gold record is sitting here in my bunk. How would you like to take it home and hang it on the wall? Because you guys deserve this for supporting me, because they did support me, emotionally, most important.
Yeah.
We used to rehearse at home, and so they put up with a lot of our chaos that our band would bring in, a garage band, but it's a lot of noise. But anyways, so I gave it to them, and then a couple of months later, I came by to visit them, and as you know, in Gold Records, there's a small replica of the actual album cover. So this one was Blizzard of Ozz, the Blizzard, and Ozzy is kind of like a little satanic looking, album cover. And especially back then, now it's like there's some unspeakable stuff in album covers, but that's their journey, whoever does that. So I looked at the gold record, and that's missing. The little cover is missing. So I asked my mom, what happened? And she goes in Spanish, El Diablo, which is the devil, because she didn't want that. So it wasn't like, do not listen to the lyrics, but she could understand the visuals behind the bands,
Yeah, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I've just been listening to you speak, and obviously, trying to give this a semi kind of religious edge to it, because it is the Godcast. But do you think people will be surprised to hear you say, "Yeah, I was a Roman Catholic and I consider myself a Christian"? Do you think people out there saying, "Well, how can he possibly say that? He's a rock and roll superstar, and he's he's lived the life of Riley, and he's and he's chased the." Not just the women, but everything else that maybe went along with it,
Yeah, I met my wife early into my career, right after I joined Ozzy, and I pretty much settled down with my wife, and then we've been married. It's going to be 40 years next year, and so we've been together since 1981. So I mean, I wrote about all of this in my book. I have a book called Off the Rails. And in the second chapter, I speak about my epiphany that I had. You're actually the first ordained priest that I actually talk to this about, because I usually, when I do a podcast, it's not every day that I do it with a priest, So more should do it, because I'm really enjoying myself.
For me as it is for you, I'm sure.
Yeah. Okay. Sorry about that. Okay. I wrote about it in the book, and my epiphany was very simple. I have been reading the Bible, and I was at my lowest point in my career, but I found a sense of peace. And I'm 30 years old. It's kind of like the door has really, it's like the elevator door goes like this, and you can't open it like that, right? But I just, I made peace with God, and I kind of made like one-sided agreement, because you really kind of make an agreement with God. I don't believe, but this is what I declare. I declare that as long as my fingers were going to keep moving, I was going to keep playing. But if I never made it as a musician, that's okay. That's fine. My relationship with God will always be more important than being a successful musician or anything else in my life. That is my platform, my base, my foundation, where I stand as a human being, my relationship with God.
Yeah. And I've chatted to a few people about this next question, Rudy, but I'm really keen to know what you think about when you're on that stage and there's, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000, whatever it is in front of you. What's going on in Rudy Sarzo's head? When I when I interviewed Vinny Coalita about this, he kind of said it's kind of there's some sort of heavenly language going on between the band and the congregation. And I also spoke to John Ilsley, who I'm sure you'll be familiar with from Dire Straits, and he said, "Well, there's a lot going on in my mind. There are moments where I'm thinking, God, this is just wonderful. This is as close to heaven as it could possibly get." What's that for you, Rudy, when you're on a stage? What's going on in Rudy Sarzo's head?
Well, it's the difference between what I do and what I'm aware of. Because what I'm aware of is I'm aware 24/7, and what I do is just in the moment. So I fully, it is my understanding that, and this is my perception. We have waves and we have particles. Wave is the state of consciousness where we connect with God.
Mm-hmm.
Energy, frequencies. So what happens is when we play music, see, to me, music, what it does is it gets people with a collective consciousness. Let's talk about, let's say, U2, because there's something very spiritual about the gathering of watching a YouTube concert. I consider them to be the biggest Christian band in the world, even though that's not their banner. They're not selling themselves as a Christian, but there is there's a Christian consciousness to it. Watching Bono close the show with a rosary on a microphone. I mean, what stronger statement than that,
Yeah.
And so let's say there's a gathering. Let's say U2 comes into town, and all these collective consciousness, which now is happening in Las Vegas, of all places, at the Sphere. But let's say they're on tour. They come to your town, and all the gathering of the masses, and they're all tuned to the same spiritual frequency. You have the band creating the music, putting out actual frequencies, waves into the audience. People are standing shoulder to shoulder watching this. The amplification of that positive frequency that they're all experience is in a stadium. There's so much energy that is being created right there at the moment, not only from the music, but from the people themselves, collectively believing in what is being played musically. So and to me, that is, yeah.
I just asked, do you feel part of that congregation? Do you feel like you're in unity with that congregation then?
Or do absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It is. Yeah. It is, because as we creators have been given the gift by God, his own gift. The creator has given us creativity, and we have the freedom of choice. You can do evil creativity or heavenly creativity, good or bad. That's people ask me, do we have free will? Yes, we have. We have the free will to do good or bad. And I can give you a list of bad things that you can do if you get given the choice, or I can give you a list of good things that you can do. That's the free will.
Well, we're going quite deep here, but I want to ask you this question from what you've just said. One of my favorite bands, Rudy, is Depeche Mode. I followed them since I was a kid, and Dave Gahan went to the Edge, and I think their music's got some real incredible theology in it. Songs about God and faith. What about those who kind of go right to the edge? I think there's an element of God in that as well that creates the genius in the artist. I don't know if this is making sense. So Dave Gahan, I suppose the question is, what you may disagree, but I think they produce some incredible music. But my question, I suppose, is do you think sometimes to create that genius, you need a bit of insanity? You need those moments of insecurity and vulnerability and in his case, addiction?
just such as I just need a
So he you know that he was heavily into heroin, and he
oh, who
flatlined.
was
Dave
who
Gahan, the lead singer of Depeche Mode, he
oh,
flat
see, I'm not, yeah, I'm
yeah
not familiar with
yeah,
them,
and
so
he was
yeah.
heavily, he was really doing the hard stuff, and he was, you know, he flatlined, and they managed to bring him back, and you know, and then they go and produce this most, for me, a most incredible album, you know, and as you know, do you feel you sometimes to go through the darkness of life, it can lead to the creative brilliance? I mean, in your case, you know, you lost a very close friend in Randy Rhoads. You know, at the time it was probably quite horrific, but did it? You know, what was the light in that for you?
Yeah, as far as that goes, I can tell you because it took me decades to find that. I mean, it's up to us, the ones who are left behind, to celebrate the legacy and the memory of the people that we have played with. It's there's no because once we are gone, you lose that immediate connection
Yeah,
of we were there, we were part of this. There's a collective consciousness that would dissipate and go into the ether and reappear somewhere down the line, but it's going to be completely different.
yeah. And what does age do for you, Rudy? Does that make you more creative, or does that make you a little bit complacent? You know, kind of I've been there, done there, got the t-shirt, or even now, like you said, you're of a certain age. You know, are you still as creative as you've ever been? Would you say?
I'm more creative now than I've ever been. A lot of it has to do because I had sounds in my head, but I did not have the resources to actually learn what they are. How do you how do you get these sounds? Why do you make logic out of them so you can make your own? Not just because it's easy to emulate something that's already recorded, but if you're gonna go, how can I play like that, but not necessarily play the same song? Where that style of music, let's say jazz, bebop, you know, and now with the internet, I every day I just go to YouTube and I lessons. I teach myself, and it's and I then I go down a rabbit hole and I just discover more, and it's like have the eureka moment where you feel like you're enlightened. You have so much information that also all that information is like, boom, that's it. That's how it's done. You know. But with creativity, just the act of creativity, you have to create. You have to, in order to learn, you have to find somebody to teach you, even if it's yourself.
Yeah, yeah. And does that teaching yourself, does that lead you to enjoy other genres of music, Rudy? You know, I mean, there was a guy who he did what was it called? Britain's Got Talent. He was an opera singer. Turns out he wasn't that keen on opera, but loved kind of thrash metal. You know, have you got some secrets hidden away down there? You know, you like your choral evensong or something. You know, what kind of other genres do you enjoy, Rudy?
Yeah, it's not really a secret because I grew up with the music before rock and roll existed. Latin jazz. It maybe it's because it's the soundtrack of my
Yeah,
puddle. I was a kid. Rock and roll came in, let's say, 55. By the time it hit Cuba, 56, I was 6 years old. I have already been listening to and watching Latin bands playing live, at events that my parents would take us. I mean, my parents never left us at home with a babysitter. Never did. Wherever they went, we went along with them.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm really keen to just return to Slade a little bit. You know,
Mm,
Noddy Holder.
mm,
I was reading some interviews about him recently, and somebody was
mm.
saying he was kind of, they never quite got the accolades that they deserved, and his voice was up there with the likes of Lennon. Now, what were you a fan of Slade?
Well, the way that Slade was marketed in the United States, and I would say pretty much through television shows like Midnight Special or In Concert, Don Kirshner, stuff like that. It was more like a party. It was glam rock. They were very glam marketed, the image glam with really poppy songs,
Yeah,
with this very over the top singer, you know. And that's all I knew about Slade, because they were not a local band, locally, you mean domestic to the United States.
And how did your first trip to the UK happen? What was your kind of relationship with the UK? Can you remember when you first came over?
Oh yeah, I'll never forget it. It was I went over to play in Port Vale, 1981, with Ozzy Osbourne in the summer of 1981. And it was a show that originally was going to be Black Sabbath performing with Motorhead headlining, but for some reason Black Sabbath pulled out, and Motorhead had been touring with us in the United States. So Lemmy asked Ozzy, "Hey, would you like to come in and take Black Sabbath's place?" And that was the first time, and I was ready for it, because to me that was Mecca. I wanted to walk the same street the Beatles walked, and everybody else, and I got to do all of that, and I'll never forget it. At that moment in time, that was my favorite place in the world. That was like the center of the musical universe.
Yeah, yeah, it's a great place. Port Vale's not that.
Yes.
Port Vale's an interesting place. It's
Yeah.
not Wembley Stadium, but it's got a uniqueness about it, definitely.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
Rudy, you are you're a musician that's worked with lots of people, haven't you? I mean, your list is just, I mean, it is an encyclopedia of musicians. And as you get to this stage of life, have you are you content with it all? You know, is there any reconcilement that's had to take place? Is there any kind of crosses that have had to be, slates needed to be clean? Where are you in your life now? You content with it all?
You know what? Every time I move on for whatever reason from one band to the other, it's I never carried the negative baggage that might have been there for whatever reason. I always carry the good memories. You know, and so I really don't feel like that is necessary at
Yeah.
all at this time in my life. Uh, yeah, no.
And I want to ask you as well about you know, I think it's quite tough for bands starting out now, isn't it? Because, you know, in your day and in the 80s when I grew up, you know, records created money for musicians, didn't they? And now, you know, a lot of new bands starting out, you know, the way they make any money is generally if they play live, and there'll be young kids who might watch this and go, "There's Rudy Sarzo. He's had a great career." What's your best advice for young musicians now?
Um, Actually has nothing to do with the business. It has to do with the quality of the music that you take to the business to have that music distributed through the masses. You know, and what I found just from reading and being in the same bands or touring with other of the musicians that I admired growing up is that there's always a church background to them, choir, learning to sing in choir, learning music at church. That today I think it's not as strong as it used to be, and it reflects in the quality of the music that's being created.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah. And what's the future hold for you, Rudy? What have you got lined up? Have you got things to look forward to as we come to the end of 2023? What's the future hold?
Well, more touring with Quiet Riot, and then we have dates already set up for next year. We're going to be playing in England at the Hard Rock Music Festival in I believe it's in March in the UK.
Yeah.
So I'm really looking forward to that. Yeah.
Is it a while since you've been in the UK?
It's been a while.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think what was the last time I played there, but yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah. Well, the music goes
Oh,
on.
deal. Play.
Yeah. Well, I tell guys to look out for that on online, and you know, I just thank you for coming on. I went to a great gig about 18 months ago. It was Whitesnake. You weren't there. With Europe and Foreigner. It was a great night out, and so the music lives on. The music stands up, doesn't it, really well, and it's a joy. And thanks for coming on, Rudy. It's been lovely talking to you. And if anybody else like to check out any more interviews with musicians, there's loads of great musicians. Just Google the Godcast or just follow the link to subscribe. So, Rudy, we send our love from England, from Manchester area, and wish you all the best for the coming year. God bless you.
Thank you, Father Alex. Thank you. God bless you.